Never imagined the day would come when I would discover something so shocking about my own son. As a parent, you carry a quiet pride, a faith that your child will walk the path you raised them on. You believe in the goodness, in their choices, in the values you poured into them since childhood. For years, I lived in the comfort of that belief, never once doubting the man my son had become. But life has a way of shattering even the strongest illusions, and my story begins in that space between trust and betrayal, where everything still seemed so perfect. My son had always been the kind people admired, handsome, intelligent, and ambitious. Neighbors would smile when they saw him, relatives often praised him at family gatherings, and his friends looked to him as a natural leader. To me, he was not just a son but a reflection of all my efforts, the proof that I had raised a man of character. He carried himself with confidence, spoke with charm, and seemed to have his life neatly mapped out. Even in love, he appeared to have chosen wisely. His partner was kind, supportive, and graceful, a young woman who blended seamlessly into our family. The way she laughed at his jokes, the way she helped me in the kitchen, the way she cared for him, it felt like they were destined to build a happy future together. Our family life carried a rhythm that felt warm and unbreakable. Dinner times were filled with laughter and stories about the day. Weekends were spent on small outings, sharing meals at local cafes, or simply sitting together in the living room, talking about everything and nothing. I often watched them, the two of them, thinking how blessed I was to see my son so happy and loved. In those moments, I could not have imagined the darkness quietly threading itself into our lives. Still, even in the brightest of days, there were shadows I chose not to see. At first, they were subtle, late-night phone calls, moments where he seemed distracted during conversations, or times when he lingered outside to finish a text before coming in. I dismissed these as the natural habits of a young man building his future, juggling work, friends, and love. After all, who doesn't need their private space? I reminded myself that trust was the cornerstone of every relationship, and I owed my son that trust. But somewhere in the back of my mind, questions began to whisper. Why did his smile sometimes fade when a message appeared on his phone? Why did his partner's eyes carry a fleeting sadness when she thought no one was looking? Why did he avoid direct answers when asked about his late nights? At the time, I brushed it all aside, convincing myself that I was overthinking, that nothing could possibly be wrong. If only I had paid closer attention. If only I had dared to confront the unease instead of hiding from it. For in those small, overlooked details lay the first cracks in the foundation of the life I thought I knew. And those cracks, though invisible at the time, were already widening into a chasm that would soon swallow us all. The little signs I had once ignored slowly began to grow louder, like whispers turning into echoes I could no longer silence. My son's behavior shifted in ways that unsettled me. He was still polite, still the same charming man everyone admired, but there was a distance in his eyes. He began coming home later than usual, claiming long hours at work or outings with friends. His explanations sounded ordinary, believable even, but the pattern was new. His partner, once cheerful and talkative, started to look withdrawn. I noticed her smiles didn't reach her eyes anymore, and her laughter had a hollow tone, as though she was trying to mask something weighing heavily on her heart. At first, I told myself it was stress, that relationships naturally go through ups and downs. But deep inside, a quiet unease began to grow. The son I knew, my boy who once told me everything, was becoming someone unfamiliar. He was secretive, careful with his phone, quick to change the subject when conversations drifted too close to his personal life. I wanted to believe it was nothing, yet my instincts whispered otherwise. One evening, while clearing the living room, I noticed a crumpled receipt tucked between the couch cushions. It was for a dinner at a place across town, a restaurant I knew he had never taken his partner to. The date on it matched a night he had claimed to be working late. My heart sank, but my mind raced to protect him. Perhaps it was a mistake, maybe it belonged to a friend, maybe I was simply jumping to conclusions. Still, I folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket, unable to throw it away. Days later, another small clue emerged. His jacket, hanging carelessly on the chair, carried a faint scent that was not his partner's perfume. It was floral, unfamiliar, almost taunting. I remember standing there, clutching the sleeve, my chest tightening with disbelief. My first instinct was to ask him outright, but fear stopped me. What if I was wrong? What if I accused him unfairly? The possibility of being mistaken felt safer than the truth I dreaded uncovering. Meanwhile, the tension in the household grew thicker. His partner seemed restless, often glancing at him with suspicion, though she never voiced it aloud. Their conversations, once easy and filled with affection, became curt and guarded. I noticed how she avoided his gaze at dinner, how he scrolled through his phone under the table when he thought no one was looking. I sat there in silence, torn between confronting the storm or pretending the skies were still clear. Inside me, a battle raged. Part of me wanted to protect my son, to shield him even if he had strayed. Another part of me, the part that believed in honesty and loyalty, wanted to demand the truth, no matter how painful. Nights became restless, my mind replaying every small detail I had overlooked, the sudden expenses, his distracted smile, her hidden sadness. I knew something was unraveling, yet I clung desperately to the hope that I was wrong. But hope is fragile when evidence begins to pile up. One late afternoon, as I passed by his room, I caught the low murmur of his voice through the door. It wasn't unusual for him to be on a call, but the tone was different, soft, intimate, laced with words I couldn't quite catch. My footsteps froze. I stood there, torn between knocking and retreating, my hand trembling against the doorframe. In that moment, I realized the line between suspicion and truth was thinning, and sooner or later, it would break. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I found myself observing every gesture, every word, searching for answers in places he didn't think I was looking. I was no longer just a parent, I had become a quiet investigator, collecting pieces of a puzzle I wasn't ready to solve. The weight of unspoken truths pressed down on me, and with every passing day, I understood more clearly. Something was terribly wrong, and soon, it would come crashing into the light. The weight of suspicion had grown too heavy to ignore. For weeks, I had carried the burden of unanswered questions, torn between my love for my son and the quiet evidence that something was deeply wrong. Every small clue I collected gnawed at my heart, the unfamiliar perfume, the hidden receipts, the late-night whispers behind closed doors. And yet, I told myself that perhaps I was imagining it, that maybe I was creating shadows where none existed. But the truth has a way of forcing itself into the open, and on one night, I could no longer deny it. It began innocently, like any other evening. He had left the house, saying he was meeting a colleague to discuss work. I wanted to believe him, I truly did, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Something in his tone, the hurried way he avoided eye contact, convinced me he was hiding more than a simple meeting. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse quicken as I debated whether to follow him. It wasn't something I had ever done before, snooping, spying, but desperation makes even the most trusting parent cross lines they never imagined. That night, my fear outweighed my pride. I waited for a while, then quietly left the house, taking care not to draw attention. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, following at a cautious distance. His car led me across town, through streets unfamiliar, until it stopped outside a small cafe tucked away on a quieter side of the city. I parked a few spaces back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might betray me. And then I saw her. She was not his partner. She was a stranger, younger, dressed in a way that screamed for attention. She walked toward him with a smile too familiar, too intimate. He greeted her with an embrace, soft, lingering, a touch that carried a truth I had prayed I would never see. My stomach dropped. My breath caught in my throat. It felt as if the world had tilted on its axis, leaving me grasping for something solid to hold. I watched, frozen in my car, as they walked inside together. Time seemed to stretch painfully long, each second a stab of betrayal. My son, the man I had raised, the man I had defended against every doubt, was sitting with another woman, laughing, holding her hand, whispering words that should have belonged only to the one waiting for him at home. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a shattering of trust, a betrayal that cut deeper because it came from someone I had never believed capable of such cruelty. For a long time, I couldn't move. I sat there in silence, tears burning my eyes, torn between storming inside to confront him and driving away to pretend I had never seen it. But pretending was no longer possible. The truth was there, cruel and undeniable, staring me in the face. I had caught him in the act. Later that night, when he returned home, I could not hold my silence. I confronted him, my voice shaking with hurt and anger. His reaction was not what I had expected. He didn't deny it. He didn't even seem surprised. Instead, he looked down, ashamed, as though the weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. He muttered excuses, stress, temptation, confusion, but none of them eased the pain. His partner stood in shock, her face pale, tears running freely as the reality sank in. She turned to him with trembling hands, begging for answers he could not give. The room filled with a silence heavier than any words. Betrayal hung in the air like smoke, choking us all. My son avoided my eyes, his partner crumbled to the floor, and I stood there in disbelief, wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. I had thought myself prepared for the truth, but nothing could have prepared me for the raw pain of watching the person you love most destroy the life you believed in. And as I looked at him, my son, my flesh and blood, I realized something even more heartbreaking. The boy I had raised was gone, replaced by a man whose choices had built walls I could not break through. That night, innocence was lost, and the home that once felt whole became a place filled with silence, tears, and questions that might never find answers. The night of the confrontation left a silence that lingered in every corner of our home. Walls that had once echoed with laughter now seemed to carry only whispers of grief. The truth had been spoken, seen, and felt. There was no going back, no pretending it hadn't happened. My son's betrayal sat between us like a wound that refused to close, bleeding into every conversation, every glance, every heavy breath. In the days that followed, the immediate consequences became painfully clear. His partner could no longer bear the weight of his lies. Her love for him had been genuine, but the discovery of his infidelity shattered her trust beyond repair. She packed her belongings with trembling hands, tears falling silently as she folded away the life she thought she was building. I stood helpless, watching her leave, her absence a reminder of what had been lost not just for her, but for all of us. The house felt emptier, as though a piece of its soul had walked out with her. My son tried to justify himself at first, claiming he had been confused, that he hadn't meant to hurt anyone, that he still cared for her. But his words rang hollow. The damage was done, and no explanation could undo the pain he had caused. His once proud shoulders seemed to slump with guilt, and though I could see shame in his eyes, I could also see denial, a stubborn refusal to fully admit the depth of his betrayal. He apologized in fragments, never fully, as though he feared speaking the truth aloud would make it more real. For me, the heartbreak was twofold. I grieved for his partner, a young woman I had come to love as family, whose trust had been broken in the cruelest way. But I also grieved for my son, not for what he had lost, but for what he had become. I struggled to reconcile the boy I had raised with the man who now stood before me. I wondered where I had gone wrong, if I had failed to teach him the value of loyalty, the weight of promises, the sacredness of love. The atmosphere at home turned heavy, each day dragging under the burden of unspoken words. Meals were silent, conversations strained. I often found myself staring at him, searching for the child I once knew in the eyes of the man who had betrayed us all. Sometimes I wanted to hold him, to remind him that even in his mistakes he was still my son. Other times, I wanted to shake him, to demand why he had chosen deceit over honesty, why he had chosen to destroy something so pure. As weeks passed, life forced us to move forward, but the scars remained. His partner did not return, and my son seemed to drift in the emptiness he had created. He spent long nights alone, perhaps reflecting, perhaps regretting, though he rarely spoke of it. I carried my own reflection in silence, torn between anger and sorrow, forgiveness and disappointment. Through it all, one lesson became painfully clear: infidelity does not only break the hearts of lovers, it breaks families, it fractures trust, it leaves wounds that time struggles to heal. It is not just about betrayal between two people, it is about the ripples that spread outward, hurting everyone who believed in the bond that has now been destroyed. To those who hear this story, I say this: trust is fragile, more delicate than glass. Once shattered, even if pieced together, the cracks remain forever. Betrayal may feel like a moment of weakness to the one who strays, but to those left behind, it is a lifetime of scars. My son's choice did not just cost him a partner, it cost him the respect of those who loved him most. And though love as a parent never disappears, it changes when confronted with such truth. Infidelity teaches us one thing above all: loyalty is not just a word, it is a promise, one that holds the power to build or to destroy. And once broken, the echoes of that choice follow us for the rest of our lives.